I like how you did the cliff notes. That's a slick move.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, that's very smart. Because big print, too, for dummies like me. This is nice.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah. I'm excited to read this, man. You are a great giver of advice, sir. What is it like to carry that burden in a wild world?
Well, I tell you what, I ain't looking for something to do. I don't have to look very far.
Yeah. It's a wild time of mass confusion and people losing their fucking minds. Very strange.
Yeah, it really is. And, I keep thinking this is about as crazy as it can get. And then I get up and
you see the NYPD dance team.
I haven't seen that.
Okay, here we go.
All right, you got to show me.
The NYPD in the middle of the craziest migrant crisis anybody's ever experienced, in the middle of places where you attack police officers, violently attack police officers, and you release with no bail, like that, right back out on the street. This is the NYPD dance team. So they developed a dance team. You remember when you were a kid and you thought about the fall of the Roman Empire? And
Yep.
you were like, did they see it coming?
You think this is a clue? Is that what you're thinking?
If a bigger clue would be an alien landing on the White House lawn. That's the only thing bigger. This is insanity. The fact that they would, put this on television. First of all, is this the news? What is this that they put this on, Jamie?
I think it's the New York news, yeah.
Okay. Isn't there a lot of other shit that's the news? That's like really important for people to know about right now?
You know what? I'll tell you, anything that lifts morale with law enforcement right now,
That's true.
You got to give them that. Anything that lifts the morale and bonds them, because they got the lowest morale ever, and I don't blame them.
I don't blame them either. This is not the solution, but they should be massively funded, not defunded. You should train them better. If you've got all these situations with people, you got people that, how much training is involved today in this time of such a demand for police officers, right? Like they're trying really hard to get police officers. They should train them like they train Navy SEALs. It should be like a very difficult process to get through. And we should be very thankful that people are doing the job, and they should be rewarded and treated well.
You know what really drives me crazy about this defunding that went on? And, of course, I think everybody's decided that was like a either really bad idea or really poorly worded idea, either way. But, listen, the last thing you want to do is try to get police officers to wear 3 or 4 different hats. You don't want them showing up saying, okay, I want to try to be a social worker and a psychologist and defuse all of this and all. A police officer should show up and enforce the law. If not, people are going to get shot and killed. Police officers should show up and suppress illegal activity, disarm people that are a threat. And after all that's done, then fine. Bring in somebody that is a social worker or whatever, but you don't want a police officer doing all of that stuff. They're there to do one job, and that is suppress illegal behavior, disarm dangerous people, and they need to do it as quickly and efficiently as they can. They don't want to do all that. They got one job.
Right.
And they need to do that one job and do it very well. And they don't need people in there saying, well, you need to kind of talk to them, and you need to this, you need to that. I'm not saying be heavy-handed or badge-heavy, but they need to do what they're there to do and then let other people come in behind them and try to do all the rest of the stuff. You don't want a cop doing 3 different jobs. You want them doing one job, and that's suppress illegal behavior, get it under control, and then let somebody else do everything else.
Yes. And you need money for that.
Of course you do.
You can't have defund the police and expect things to get better.
No.
The whole idea behind that is so insane.
It was, and let me tell you, the people that were yelling defund the police weren't speaking for the people they were protecting. In those neighborhoods, they didn't want less police.
No.
They didn't want less police. It was their businesses that were getting robbed, their businesses were getting burned down. They didn't want less police. And it's so often that these activists, and I call it tyranny of the fringe. I've written this new book we'll talk about, I'm sure, in due time. but I talk about tyranny of the fringe. These activists aren't speaking for the people they say they're speaking for. They're speaking for themselves. They like the camera. They like the attention. They're not speaking for the groups they supposedly are speaking for.
And it works. That's what's crazy. It's effective. And in this day and age, when it's attached to something like the idea of being a progressive or being a good person, being on the left, being a kind person, you go along with these things, and the next thing you know, you're supporting the wildest of the leftists. You're supporting Antifa. You're turning a blind eye to violent thugs. And this is how screwed up everything's gotten just over the last few years. It seems like 10 years ago, this is not possible.
No, and it's accelerating and not decelerating yet, but I'm beginning to sense that there's a pushback.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think they've made a serious miscalculation. They pushed so hard and so long that they've started to wake up middle America to the point that they're saying, wait a minute, what? That's not okay. When they start rewriting history, when they start rewriting science, when they start trying to get the government to co-parent with you, with your child, people start saying, okay, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't mind when you were running around here talking crazy, but now you're starting to get into my business. Like my grandmother used to say, now you've gone from preaching to meddling now.
Well, you know what's happening in
okay.
Canada, right? I mean, Canada has some pretty insane cases that are going on right now about gender transition from really young kids. And there's all this pushback with parents, and there's all this because the parents are not being told that their children want to transition. So there's this guy that was talking about these issues of parents' rights in Canada, and he specifically said that parents don't have rights in Canada, that they have, I feel like he said they have obligations. Is that the term he used? But he said under Canadian law, parents don't have rights. Like, what the fuck are you saying? Let me make sure that's exactly what he said before I get sued. But when I saw it, I was like, this is such a crazy thing to say. And if that's the way their law is structured, fix that. Like, who are other people to tell you how to parent your child? And who are these people? Have they been vetted? Are they really good at parenting? They're supposed to be teachers. They're not supposed to be parents.
Here's my problem with that. If you look at this right now, and I understand, I don't know if you know, but I'm starting a whole new network called Merritt Street Media.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, and we launch at the 1st of April. We were going to launch at the end of February, but we've delayed it a month in order to pick up some more massive distribution. And I have committed myself to owning the debate lane in America. I'm willing to let all sides come and say what they want to say, but they got to be willing to answer hard questions. And I've had some of these folks, I've already shot about 30 shows on Dr. Phil Primetime, and we're going to have 4 hours of news and a whole lot of other programming, but it's all about, let's be commonsensical. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at science. Let's not look at what you want to be the truth. Let's look at what is the facts. Let's look at what is science. And we've got these people that, it's interesting they choose words like gender-affirming care. That's interesting that they call it that, but really what they're talking about is hormonal therapy or sex reassignment surgery on children. And in fairness, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Endocrine Society, or whatever the exact name of that is, all of the major medical associations have signed off on this, Joe. They've signed off on it. And I have never seen those organizations sign off on anything with less information as to whether or not it does long-term harm of anything in my life. And when I ask about that, when I bring that up, then they immediately label you as transphobic. And I thought that the deal was first do no harm. And all of the European countries, Sweden, Norway, they've all stopped doing it because they say, we cannot say in good conscience that this does no harm, because it does harm. If you look at the long-term consequences, if someone changes their mind at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, they can't decide which pajamas they want to wear at night. And their reason for doing it is it stops this drive for suicide, that there's a suicide epidemic. It doesn't fix that. It doesn't fix all the comorbid issues that come along with feeling like they're in the wrong body. But yet they're pushing this, and we're going to do some shows that are already taped that are revealing what the real results of this are. And I think people are going to be shocked that these medical organizations have signed off on this. I think they've just given in to the pressure.
Yeah, I just don't understand where the pressure is coming from. Another phrase they're using now is life-saving gender-affirming care. They like to smash them all together like that.
Well, I don't think
it's gaslighting.
I just don't think that there's evidence to suggest that's true. Is this the guy you're talking about?
He said there's no such thing as parental rights in Canada. Children have rights in Canada, and those kinds of policies restrict the rights children have. This is a wild thing, man. It's I've never seen anything like it.
But America's not far behind that, because
No.
I've talked to a lot of teachers, and they're telling me that they have a duty to the children, that if the child is not ready to talk to their parents about this, that it's okay for them to keep a secret from the child. Now, let me tell you what my problems with this are and see what you think. First off, if this is either a psychological phenomenon or a medical phenomenon, and the teachers are not trained in either psychology or medicine, they're not any more trained to deal with that than they are to take out the kid's spleen in the homeroom. So if that's true, if it's a psychological thing, if it's gender dysphoria, or it's a medical issue, then you need someone trained in child psychology, psychiatry, or medicine. And the teacher's not trained in any of those three things. Like I say, they're not any more trained in that than they are to take out the child's spleen. So how are they qualified to deal with that? Secondly, it's teaching the child to keep a secret from their parents. It's teaching deception and interfering between the child's relationship with their parent. Now, their issue with their justification for that is, well, if the child goes home and announces this, or if we tell it to the parent, then the child could get abused, the child could get judged, the child could get kicked to the curb. But they have to admit statistically that is very rare. And if that's the case, that's what we have Department of Child and Family Services for. That's what we have Child Protective Services for. If that's the case, then you call in for some intervention if the child is being abused at home for whatever reason. Then you get intervention in that way. But you don't come between the child and their parent. The parent has the right to know what's going on.
Without a doubt. And also, these people that are teaching these kids, do we even know them? You don't know them. I mean, how much do you know about them before they start teaching your kids?
Well, that's
it could be insane. It's not like the threshold for teachers is so high that only the elite of the elite cross it. You see a lot of these weird people teaching classes, and you don't necessarily want them giving advice to children about decisions for the rest of their life. And here's an important point that people need to really take into consideration. There's a reason why they have little kids become suicide bombers. Because you can talk kids into almost anything. You can talk them into believing in Santa Claus. You talk kids into believing in all kinds of ridiculous shit because they're really young. You could easily convince them in one way or another that they're anything, that they're queer, that they're trans. You could 100% convince some kids of all kinds of things, especially by reinforcing it with love and support and happiness. You can convince people of a lot of things. That's what's uncomfortable for a lot of people. For a lot of gay people, they're uncomfortable with the idea that a lot of these kids are just going to grow up to become gay. My friend Tim Dillon's talked about that a bunch. He says it's homophobic. It's like they're trying to say, no, you're a girl. And really, maybe you're just gay. Like, that's okay. It was always a thing. And now all of a sudden it's getting, you're looking at little kids. It might just be gay kids. You're saying maybe you're a girl. Maybe you need to go to a gender reassigning surgery center and never have an erection or an orgasm for the rest of your life. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah,
they're so young.
It's not, I don't think it's appropriate or safe for children. And I think there is a huge body of literature that addresses these issues from end to end. There's not a huge body of literature about the transgender population, and that's the problem. And what literature is out there suggests that you get, and this is what you see from the European countries. They've done study after study from these suppressive hormones compared to doing psychotherapy, and there's not much difference. If you do psychotherapy, you can ease the depression, you can ease the suicidal tendencies with psychotherapy without doing the irreversible things. They say, well, you can reverse those things. No, that's not true. If you arrest the development, that can have ramifications long term, or at least they can't say it doesn't have ramifications long term.
There's also serious side effects from the hormone blockers.
Well, of course, and if you're doing testosterone blockers, for example, that does have long-term consequences. And my point is, they can't say it doesn't. They don't have a body of literature that says it doesn't. And
what do you
I'm
think
not
is
a physician.
Behind it, though? Like, how did this? This is so contrary to the way most people feel, what do you think is behind it? Especially the push towards children, affirming children. Do you think it's because there's people that are queer or LBGT, whatever, and they want other people to be a part of their group? Is it they want more LBGT people? They want to encourage this behavior? They think it's suppressed, and maybe there's more people that are gay or whatever, and they want to come out and they just get suppressed by it, so they're trying to make it like more enthusiastic? Like, how is this trans thing becoming a major point of debate with children where it never has in history? In your life, in my life, there was never all this talk about trans children. Like, this, it seems insane that we've forgotten that kids don't know what the fuck is going on yet.
I think a lot of it is owing to social media platforms and the internet. I think this is what I'm talking about when I say the activist, I don't think speak for the community at large. I think they get an agenda that they're pushing, and I think they really get wrapped up in this, and it gets a lot of oxygen on the internet. It gets a lot of oxygen on social media platform. Now, they say there's no social contagion here, but the girls that are claiming to be transgender, that percentage has gone up. Some reports say it's gone up 800%, 1,000% over the last several years. And they say, well, that's because they feel more comfortable talking about it now. Is that true, or is it because you read about it, you see it on social media, and you think, well, I can distinguish myself in this way? I think there is a social contagion effect. So people jump on the bandwagon, and if it's for a short period of time, but they've done things that can't be reversed, I think that's really tragic. And they say there are very few detransitioners. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot more detransitioners that want to reverse this and come back than are being reported.
But there's a lot of deep shame attached to that, obviously.
Of course.
It's also something that you don't want people to know about. It's It's so personal. It defines you for the rest of your life. Everyone's going to know that's the guy that used to be a girl and became a guy again, and then there's all the questions and all the bullshit that comes along with that.
I will say this. I don't think teachers want to get involved in this. I think some of them push it. I think teachers at large just want to teach. I don't think they want to get pulled into this.
Well, it's like bad cops, right? Like you hear about a bad teacher and you think all teachers are like that. But that's not ridiculous. Most of them are just people who their profession, what they enjoy is teaching people.
They do. And let me tell you, teachers don't get into teaching for the money. I don't know a teacher that doesn't get into their own pocket to get resources for the classroom, to help with the classroom, to put up signs and bring in materials for the classroom. Most of them are very dedicated. They're very good people that teach because they really want to help young people. I think they're some of the most underpaid, dedicated people in this entire country, and they don't want to deal with this stuff.
Agreed. I feel the same way as I feel about teachers as I do about police officers. I think most of them are great.
I do too.
Just
I
there's
think
a small amount of interactions that people have. And I also think about both teachers and police officers, the stress of their job and the experiences that they have, particularly if you're teaching public school in maybe a sketchy area. I mean, those people are risking their health often. There's violence. It happens all the time to teachers. There's all these cell phone videos of teachers getting beat up.
I did a show last week with 3 teachers from around the country that tried to take a cell phone, tell a student to put their cell phone away, and got attacked. And one of them wound up in the hospital for a week, had to have knee surgery, go on workers' comp, wound up having to take bankruptcy, lost her house. All of that. A student jumped on her and just beat the hell out of her.
Is this the one that was in the hallway? It was a viral video?
Well, the one I'm talking about had 67 million views.
Is this a woman that was beat up by a man or a young boy?
No, I saw that one. This one was beat up by a girl.
Another girl?
And, here's the thing. There were all of these students taking videos of it, but nobody helping. Finally, somebody pulled the girl off the teacher.
Well, they're scared. If you jump in, they'll attack you, and people are scared.
It is scary. And, people will hear us talk about this and say, oh, you're transphobic. I don't hate anybody. I just am concerned for the welfare of young people that get led in a particular direction.
Well, that's just a way to silence people from talking about it. They'll say you're transphobic.
Well,
and it might not even necessarily be people. I have a feeling a lot of the shit that we're dealing with online is foreign agents. And then what they're doing is setting up thousands and thousands of accounts and targeting specific topics and specific things. And I think that's one of them. I think it would be a great way to weaken America, to make everybody at each other's throats about the dumbest fucking things, and then even put children and children's health and lives at risk with this crazy shit that we're talking about right now. And the more that stuff is going on in our country, the more there's going to be a decay of our appreciation for America, less patriotism, less paying attention to what we're doing.
Well, let me tell you, I've been, you've heard all of these stories of people getting swatted.
Yes.
And for anybody that doesn't know, that's when they call in a phony report, and so a SWAT team shows up at your house. That can go south in a hurry.
And it has.
Yeah,
people have died.
People have been shot.
Yeah.
Since New Year's Eve, Robin and I have had SWAT incidences 6 times.
Jesus Christ.
And I'm no victim, so I fight back. And I've got cybersecurity people, and we got involved and found out what was going on. And the source of this was a group out of Russia.
Of course.
And these bot farms, when people say that, you think these are phony accounts and people are hating on the internet and posting all this stuff up and they're not real accounts, these bot farms, some of them, these accounts are 10 or 12 years old, and they've got millions, not 10 or 10,000 or 12,000, millions in these bot farms. And so we've been getting into all that with our cybersecurity experts. And when all of a sudden somebody targets somebody and says, oh, they're transphobic or they're racist or whatever, and you get into who all's saying this, these aren't real accounts.
Exactly.
They're not real people.
Exactly.
And so somebody gets, oh, well, I need to apologize for this or apologize for that. I know who I am. I know what I believe. I'm not transphobic. I'm not racist. I'm not any of those things. And so, but they jump on and start saying all that stuff about you. Well, you just got to decide you know who you are or you don't.
Yeah, it's just people need to be aware of what's going on if you're engaging in these social media platforms. That is a factor. There are real people out there, and you can connect with them, and it's very valuable. You can learn a lot of things.
Right,
you
of course.
Interact with a lot of people. But also, there's a lot of fake accounts, a lot. And there was an FBI, a former FBI, was he an analyst, Jamie? He estimated that it may be as high as 80% of all the accounts on Twitter are fake.
Yeah.
I won't say X.
Yeah.
Elon's my friend, but X is ridiculous. I'll say it occasionally if I'm being charitable.
Yeah.
It's fucking Twitter. Because what are you making an X? No, you're tweeting. I tweeted this thing out. We've been saying that for too long, bro. You can't just change it. But that's an insane number. Let's say he's wrong by 30%. It's still half the people online. I mean, if he's accurate, that's crazy. That means there's just been a mass infiltration of foreign agents into all of the discourse about politics and gender and society and women's rights and men's rights and war and Ukraine and every fucking thing that happens in the world. Everything. And you're getting confused as to what the general consensus is of the population. Because you go out with most people, and you're like, what do you think about that? And they're like, fuck that. You're like, yeah, right, fuck that. Why is everybody going along with this? What the hell's going on?
Yeah, it's like the emperor's new clothes. Nobody wants to speak up because they don't want to seem like a fool. But, I did not want to write another book. I told Robin I'd written 9 books, and I said, I'm done. My last book will be an autobiography when I'm sitting out in the backyard or playing golf every day. But I wrote this book, We've Got Issues, How You Can Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity, because I looked around at what was going on and said, somebody's got to tell the truth. Somebody's got to call this for what it is. And I one of the big things I talk about is what happened to our society because of social media platforms and the internet. And, think about it. We had the Industrial Revolution, right? And until that happened, we were a very agricultural-driven society, right? Everybody worked on the farm. And so family units were really tight because everybody had to work all day, every day. And so they'd come in at noon and have a meal, and they'd come back at dinner time and, have dinner. And everybody worked together on the farm. But then when things got mechanized with the Industrial Revolution, then people moved to the city. And we went from 95% agricultural to now it's about 1%. And that was a huge change in the human race. And there's not been that big a change until 2008 or 2009. And that was the advent of the smartphone. It was like big airplanes flew over the country and dropped smartphones on everybody. That's the biggest change in society since the Industrial Revolution. Think about it.
Yeah.
We went from walking around with our heads up like this to down. People check their phone an average of 352 times a day. Think about 352 times a day.
That's insane.
Now, that's adults and children alike. And look what happened to kids. When I turned 16, when I was 15 and 364 days, 23 hours, and 59 minutes. I was at the DMV waiting to get my driver's license, right? Now, kids turn 16, they don't even go get their driver's license. Yeah, I'll get it sometime.
Yep.
They start dating later. They start having sex later. They get their driver's license. Everything later. Why? Because they're watching people live their lives on the internet instead of living their own lives. And in 08, 09, and 10, we saw the biggest spikes in depression, anxiety, suicide, and loneliness since they've been keeping records. That's when the cell phones came out. That's when smartphones came out. That's when the internet blew up. Because people started watching people live their lives instead of living their own life, and those lives they were watching were fiction. And they compared their life to that life and said, I suck.
Well, there's a lot of depression amongst women, more self-harm than ever, more suicidal ideology and suicide. It's like Jonathan Haidt's work, the Coddling of the American Mind. It shows like there's a real spike when social media becomes invented because you're comparing yourself, and it just there's no compare. You can't compare. It's not. First of all, those people are either surgically altered or they're using filters. There's a lot of them. I mean, some of them are natural, but for the most part, you're getting these glamorous depictions of a life that's impossible for you to imagine. It's depressing.
Yeah, and so I've had influencers on the show that said, I post a video where I'm putting on all these clothes and saying I'm going to the NBA All-Star game, and should I wear this or should I wear that? They said as soon as that camera stops, I carefully take those clothes off because I don't own them. I have to take them back to the store. I'm not going to the NBA All-Star game. I'm going to sit on the couch in my sweats just like everybody else. You've seen it. There's that
private jet thing?
That private jet thing in Santa Monica. They rent that out by the 15 minutes.
Yeah, you go into a fake private jet and you take photos like you're, living the jet set lifestyle. You're just on a set somewhere.
It's in a warehouse out there, and they get in there and put on their beach clothes and then their ski clothes. They ain't going anywhere.
They ain't going anywhere.
But everybody compares themselves to that and go, I'm such a loser. My life sucks. And so they compare themselves and go, I'm no good. And so everybody started these kids started getting depressed. I mean, it went up. The
thing is, like, if you do it really well, if you become a fitness influencer or an online influencer and you do it really well, you become super successful and you can actually make a really good living doing it. So what we're seeing with a lot of these people are just like really bad open micers. Yeah. Like they want to be Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
But it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. If you want to be an influencer, they're just sort of LARPing.
Well, listen to this. Since 2010 and 2011, there was a 62% increase for older teens, 189% increase in depression for preteens, 70% increase in suicide for older teens, 151% increase for preteens. I mean, that's terrible.
Terrible.
And I think the biggest part of it is because they stop living their lives. They don't have friends. They don't get out and do activities. They're addicted to this two-dimensional screen.
Yeah. And what comes after that thing? Because that thing, no one would have ever believed that a little thing that you keep in your pocket would have you on it 6 hours a day. You'd be like, that's not possible. But you look at your screen time. Most people, Jamie, what's your screen time? What's your average?
It doesn't. I've thought about this. It doesn't include when I'm looking at my laptop and then my other computer.
Does it include that?
It's just my iPhone.
Right. Oh, right. You're saying it'd be
I'm
more.
looking. I switch off my phone to look at different screens. I'm looking at my TV and then 4 screens at home. But my screen time is like 4 hours a day.
Mine would be way higher if I didn't have to do a podcast.
Yeah.
That's the one thing about podcasts. It's one of the rare opportunities where you sit and talk to a person and you're not interacting with that stupid thing at all.
Yeah, I wonder if people, of course, because of what I do from a psychological standpoint, I wonder if people ever stop and think how many people you look at every day and never really see when you go through your life. I mean, whether it's the people in the parking lot, the people behind the counter, that you look at and never really see.
Yeah. How many people you write off?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as we've become, like, especially if you're living in a city, as we've become more populated, people have become almost, they look at people as like a liability. They look at people as like an inconvenience. There's too many of them. As opposed to if you live in a place that doesn't have very many people, you look at people like, that's my neighbor. What's up, Bob? There's a guy in my neighborhood. I drive by him, and he's always working on his garden. I look forward to waving to this guy because he waves at every car. Every car that drives by, the guy puts his hands up, waves. I love that dude.
It's a Texas thing.
It's a Texas thing.
Yeah.
It's that, my friend Bridget says it's Texas friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the fucking guy does it to everybody. Everybody that comes by, I watch. This guy just waves at everybody.
I have friends coming from California, and somebody lets you in traffic. You wave at them. What are you doing? The guy let me in traffic. I'm thanking him.
Bro, if you live in New York City and you wave at everybody you see, you're going to get the fuck beaten out of you. Someone's going to beat your ass.
What, are you trying to start something?
Someone's going to fuck you up. Someone's definitely going to rob you. You're just standing still, waving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what do you got on you, bro? It's like, but this is, it's a better way to live. It's a better way to live, to be friendly to people.
Oh, for sure.
And I think the anxiety of the internet is I often compare it to the anxiety of living in a hyper-populated city. You get stuck in traffic every day. It's like this anxiety that comes of being stuck in traffic. You get crazy. Like, friends that don't know what it's like to drive to Orange County. We went to Orange County this past weekend for the UFC. And you're driving in Orange County, but you ain't going nowhere at 5 p.m. You ain't going nowhere.
No.
You're going nowhere. That's bumper to bumper. Everywhere you look, it's wild, and it takes hours to get anywhere. And salute those heroes, those people who live in Orange County and commute to L.A. You people are savages. You just wanted a backyard so bad.
Yeah. And when you get home, you got it made, but it's hell getting there.
It's hell getting there. But with a lot of them, what they do is they just take the ride home as bad. If you're smart, you get in real early and you go to the gym. Just get a gym near your job.
Yeah, a lot of people do that.
That's the best way. Also, it's the best way to start your day. You already got the workout in. You're awake when you get to work. It's the best way to do it. You can get it in. We used to have a lot of 6:30 jiu-jitsu classes. I was always amazed. But I'm like, yeah, that's what you got to do. You work at 9. Get in there at 6:30. You beat traffic. You made it downtown.
Yeah, you got to adapt. You got to adapt. And things are changing, but we're not adapting very well in too many areas. We're not adapting very well.
That's what my fear is. My fear is that technology moves so fast, the only way to adapt is to integrate. That's what my big fear is. My big fear is that with all this Neuralink stuff, I don't even know if it's a fear or if it's a prognostication. When I look at the future, I go, well, if you just take it from here and just follow a normal path of progression, where's it going? It's going to deeper and deeper integration. And it's my fear that this is what we're looking forward to. We're looking forward to some sort of integration, whether it's a headpiece or an actual implant. I don't think we're very far away from that.
No, this AI is going to change things in a big way. And these, we're in an election year right now, and, creating deep fakes using AI, I'm really wondering if it's going to drive the election in some ways this year, because it's getting so good. I've seen myself in ads selling products. I mean, me talking, selling products I've never even heard of. It's not me.
Same as me. Yeah.
It's a deep fake.
There's hundreds of them. I saw a Warren Buffett one that's all over the internet. It's Warren Buffett getting interviewed by a lady on CNN about Bitcoin, and it's everywhere. If I pull up my feed right now, I'll show you. And I don't understand how they can't find this and make it so that no one can upload it. But this video is in. I'll show you because it's so crazy. It's in so much of my feed. All these. Giveaway. These are all different versions of the same video. It's like 35% of my feed. All these giveaway. Yeah. There's so many of them. It's all the same thing. It's all Warren Buffett telling you about Bitcoin and something that they're doing, and it's all deep fake.
Yeah, and I don't know how we try to send out cease and desist letters and all this stuff. They they just change the corporate entity and pop up again.
I've done the whole rabbit hole. It goes all the way back to Russia. It's the same kind of thing. Or it goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of foreign countries that are doing it. And they're doing it for, especially with these kind of things. It's like the Nigerian print scam. It's like they know how to make money. You don't have to get everybody. If you cast a wide net, you get a few fish. Most fish are like, I see that net. Get the fuck out of here. But there's a lot of people that are just dull-minded. And they've got a little bit of money in their bank account, and next thing you know, they're investing in some fake Bitcoin exchange.
Yeah, we see it in the love scams all the time.
The love scams are horrible.
And they're coming out, and it's so sad because these are elderly women that are retired, and in sometimes 30, 60 days, they'll take what they spent their entire life accumulating, and it's gone. I mean, there's no getting it back. It's gone.
And it's just interaction on email with someone? Is that what it is?
Yeah. Well, now it's even worse because they are deep faking. They're and it's some Nigerian, but they do a voice anonymizer, and they're actually talking to her.
You can use someone else's voice now too.
Yeah.
That's what's really crazy, that they can use your voice to say. All they have to do is record a phone conversation. I think it's like 30 seconds long, and they can take that phone conversation and use your voice to call someone and tell them anything. Hey, listen, I'm in real bad trouble. You've got to do me a solid favor right now. You need to wire $2,000. I'll pay you back Monday. Trust me. This is like a thing for my life. I can't tell you anymore, but can you do this for me? Yeah, man. I got you. And next thing you know, your friend walks through the door. You go, I was just wiring money to you. Like, what?
Yeah.
The fuck are you talking about? I'm right here.
Yeah. And it'll be somebody like really famous that's obviously very rich, and they'll say, I just need $5,000 right now. Why would somebody that is clearly a multimillionaire need $5,000? They don't think.
Well, they probably are hypnotized by the fact that they're talking to Dr. Phil. First of all, they're like, what? The real doctor? You're the doctor, Dr. Phil?
Yeah.
Oh, my God, I've seen your show 1,000 times. So they're hypnotized by that, and then you're making sense. Like, I'm going to do you a solid. You give me this $5,000, I'm going to give you $50,000 on Monday. Like, holy shit, okay. Like, we're running a thing to see how trustworthy people are. I think people are trustworthy, and I trust you. So I'm going to do this for you. You send $5,000, you trust me, and then next thing you know, that guy's out $5,000, and it wasn't really you. That's easy to believe.
Yeah, it's human nature. And we intercepted a manual from Nigeria. And it was a training manual for the workroom, and it says, how to get these women to trust you. It says contact them like at 10 o'clock at night. That's when they're most vulnerable. Wow. It had like 20 or 30 pickup lines.
Wow.
It's had all of these poems to use, all of this stuff. We've got the manual. We've put it on the air so people see it.
Imagine that is an industry. How clever are Nigerians, though? They figured that out immediately upon the internet. They're like one of the first ones. They were the pioneers of the online scam.
Yeah. We got a couple of them have been extradited back to the United States now.
Really?
Where they'll probably get in front of a DA that gives them their walking papers.
Especially if it's in New York.
Yeah.
You're in, you're out. Unless you're Donald Trump, then you're going to jail. But what they're doing is pretty wild that they use the internet that way. I mean, I wonder how big that industry is. I bet it's pretty sizable.
Oh, I think it's $1 billion industry. I think they're taking down $1 billion. I think it's big money.
God.
We've had some on the show where they've taken down $1 million from one woman.
Oh.
And sometimes it's 10,000, 20,000. Sometimes it's 100,000. But we've had them. It's $1 million.
I was watching this one really sad one. It was this lady and her dad. And her dad, the mama died, and the dad was lonely. And the dad had been interacting with some woman, and he went all the way to Europe to meet her. He'd been sending her money. Went all the way to Europe to meet her, and then something came up, and she couldn't meet him. And then it happened again. He went to Europe again and again. She said, and by this time he's in the hole. $250,000, $350,000, $350,000 just sending money to this person that doesn't exist.
Yeah. When I finally prove it to him, it's painful to do it. I tell him, I take no pleasure in telling you this, but the only thing worse than being in a bad relationship for a year is being in one for a year and a day. You need to know it now.
Yeah.
And it stopped the bleeding. It's
God,
unbelievable.
That's got to be devastating, too, for the rest of your life. You feel like a fucking loser, too.
Yeah, and you know you're not ever going to get it back.
No, you're never going to get it back. They got you. This humiliation. Just you feel so foolish.
Yeah, and when they realize it's a foreigner that's taking it from somewhere that is halfway around the world, it's terrible. And yeah, I think part of that is why people are so kind of paranoid about what's happening at the border. With people coming across, and they know that they're coming across from so many different countries now. I think there's a distrust.
Rightly so. I mean, this is something that every president has agreed on. If you go back and watch Obama's speeches, you go back and watch Bush's speeches, all the presidents before us, including Clinton, have all talked about having a border, having a strong border, having a protected border. But this is a weird thing they're doing. They're just letting people come in, and the Red Cross is encouraging it. Different groups are encouraging it. They're giving people maps, showing them how to do it. This is crazy. There's a mass migration into America.
Well, I've been to the border recently, and I talked to those guards down there, and I'm telling you, I spent just a day down there, and I know there have been people that have spent a lot more time down there than that. But what I heard down there was, even knowing, I felt like I knew a lot about it before I went down there, but I was shocked. As much as I thought I knew about it, I was shocked when I got down there. Though, first off, the morale among those guards down there is the fact that they're hanging in and doing as well as they are they're turning into social workers. They went down there to be guards, and they say what we're doing now, instead of apprehending these people, is we're greeting these people, and we're processing them and giving them money and resources. And it's interesting. You've been down there, right?
I have not.
There are the Texas border guards, and they wear brown uniforms. And then there are the federal that wear green. And if you get apprehended by a brown uniform, you get arrested, processed, and sent back. If you get apprehended by a green uniform, you get arrested, processed, given a court date in 4 years, 7 years, or whatever, and released into the country. So they run to the green uniforms and run away from the brown uniforms. Same job, different color uniforms. The green uniforms, their court date might be 7 years. But if they run into a green uniform, they get processed, money, and they're into the country.
That's wild. And when did that start happening?
It's been going on for a good while. Now, Abbott, of course, has been taking some of them and bussing them up into different locations.
Yeah.
Instead of sending them back, which has lately been something you can't do. You can't send them back. So they can't send them back now? Well, I don't know what they're doing with them since this last thing that they just came up with. And in talking to in talking to the union guy who's head of the union for all of the guards, it was interesting. I asked him, what do you need? What do you need down here to do your job? His name is Brandon Judd. And he said, we don't need more money. We don't need more agents. We don't need new legislation. We just need you to let us do our job. We just need you to apply the laws that exist now and we'll be fine. Well, you don't need. We don't. I said, wait a minute. You're telling me you don't need more money or more agents? He said, no. Just let us do our job. If you we had in place a hold in Mexico instead of come over here. Just use the legislation that's on the books, and we're fine. We're not trying to keep people out. We just want to have enough of a flow control that we know who's coming in. These aren't bad guys that are trying to be mean to people down there. We just need to know who it is.
What do you think the motivation is behind the federal Border Patrol people letting people go? Like, whose decision is this, and why? Forget about whose. We don't know that, right? Why? Why would they want that? What are the benefits of that? Is it cheap labor? Is it people eventually that will vote?
Well, I think it's virtue signaling. I think they've taken this position that said, hey, we want everybody. And I get that. Listen, I'm very pro-immigration. I just think it needs to be legal.
Yeah.
You need to go through the process.
Yeah.
It's a felony to enter this country illegally. And so, but they're doing that, and they're pulling them out of the water. They're pulling them off of the wall and processing them and giving them a court date that, because of our system, is sometimes 7 or 10 years. And then they're legally in the country. They've got papers. They can say, no, I was processed at the border. They're just not coming through the ports of entry.
Right, but you're aware that this is happening all over the world, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what do you think the motivation? There's got to be some sort of a decision that's been made to allow this to happen, or to not stop it from happening, or to encourage it to happen. It's not like this is like a spontaneous, organic movement. People just decide to move to Europe, and people just decide to move to America. It seems like it's something coordinated, right?
Well, look at it this way. You look at California, for example. And I said we've got issues. I talk about 10 principles for a healthy society, and one is you don't reward bad behavior. We've got people that we know are lawbreakers if they're coming in illegally. And so what do we expect them to do once they get here? And we're rewarding that behavior. They come in illegally. We reward it by giving them a free pass for 7 to 10 years, because that's how long it's going to take for them to get a hearing. And you know how many will show up for that hearing? And most people would say none. No, I bet you they all show up for their hearings, because it's been 7 to 10 years, and they'll show up and say, hey, I've been waiting 7 to 10 years. The system will probably at that point let them stay. They've been here 7 to 10 years. They've had children who are citizens because they were now born in the country. I bet you a high percentage of them show up for those hearings because they will predict getting a good result when they show up for the hearing. And they'll have American-born children at that point. So we're subsidizing behavior that we don't want. We don't know who it is. And we've got they tell me that between 2010 and 2020, they had about 1,100 to 1,500 Chinese come across the border. And in the first 11 months of 2023, they had about 33,000 come across the border.
Are you worried about that in terms of it being a military threat? Are you thinking these are people that are escaping a totalitarian, oppressive government, and they want to be able to make their own money and live in the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Yes.
Both.
I think there are people that 100% want to get out away from the oppressive government there, for sure. And the number of military-aged men, now I'm just told by people that are at the border and have witnessed this themselves, the number of military-age men that are showing up with military haircuts, clearly in shape. They're saying these guys are showing up with six-packs and military boots that are coming in is not an insignificant number. Now, where are they going? We don't know. We don't know where they're going. We're not following them. We're not tracking them. And one thing I want to be real careful about, and I'm very sincere about this, I don't want to say anything that causes people to feel badly or foster any kind of hatred toward Asian people in the United States. It's not the people, it's the government that's the problem. I think that we've got, it's just like, if they are sending people over here that are military aged with an agenda, would we be naive to think that if we've let that many in, that they couldn't spread out across the country and in some coordinated effort attack the energy grid here on a given day and create havoc? Of course they could.
Of course they could. Do you remember when that cop went rogue in L.A. a few years back? I don't remember what caused it, what happened, what the situation was, but he just started killing people. He killed a bunch of people, killed a bunch of cops, and then they wound up getting to him near Big Bear, somewhere up there. He had like holed up in a cabin, and they wound up shooting him. Do you remember that story?
I remember exactly.
And he terrorized that city for as long as he was alive. He terrorized those cops. And a good friend of mine who knows a lot about the military world and the tactical world said, listen, man, it would take 10 dudes, 10 well-trained dudes, and they'd take over this fucking city. I go, really? He goes, 10 guys. He goes, 10 bad motherfuckers who are well-trained and well-armed. Do you remember was it North Hollywood, the bank robbery, where those crazy fucks showed up with bulletproof vests and machine guns and took over a bank and had a shootout with the cops on the street? It was insane. It was like a scene out of Heat. That scares the fucking shit out of me.
Well, it should. I mean, we should be afraid of that.
With all this defund the police talk and then that happening at the same time. If you were playing chess and you were from another country, and we're so naive because nothing ever happens here. We try to imagine that it only happens in other places. But we're part of the reason why it's happening in a lot of these other places. And if you were from another country and you decided to slowly amass a force in the United States, that's what you would do. And to see this happening, to see that no one is saying that might be a possibility that's not being discussed. I mean, I hear a few people like you saying it. Brett Weinstein said it. A few other people say it. But most people don't even want to even put it out there.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but let's be commonsensical here. How do I get on the Wi-Fi here? I want to show you something.
Jamie, can you send it to him? Or let's pause here. Let's pause for a second, and Jamie will get you connected. Hold on a second. You ever seen a man type so fast with one hand?
No, and he did it the first time, too.
Jamie's a goddamn wizard. He's the best one-handed Googler on planet Earth. And now he's extra hindered because he's got Carl on his lap.
I got him on the desk now. So
Carl, I heard Carl snoring earlier. I was listening. I heard a little.
Can I send this to Carl? Can you wake Carl up enough for me to send it to him?
Sure.
He's got quick pause. How can I send this to you?
You can airdrop it. Jamie, help him out here.
How do I send this to you?
We're back.
Can you play that?
Yeah, maybe.
What is it?
This is from the border.
It's a video of the border?
Yeah. It's me talking to that Brandon Judd at the border.
Okay, here we go.
Will it play?
The
these children that are coming in with someone that says, I'm their mother, aunt, uncle, or whatever, we have no way of verifying that.
We do not. We used to. Under President Trump, we had rapid DNA testing. That's been done away with.
Are they given money, these people that are released into the country?
So it's our taxpayers that ultimately facilitate the travel. But yes, travel is facilitated and they are given all the necessities that they need.
But that could be a trafficker.
There's a very good possibility that they're being trafficked, that they're going into the sex industry, or they're being forced into the sweatshops.
And we know that. We knowingly are spending our tax dollars to sell children into sex trafficking. How under any theory is that okay for us to be spending tax dollars to traffic children?
Holy shit.
Now, this is the head guy on the border. And I asked him when this went on a little more, we went in more depth. You know you're on camera here, right? You just said we're spending tax dollars to sell children into sex slavery. And he said, yeah. I said, why have you not talked about this? He said, nobody's ever asked me these pointed questions, but I'm grateful that you're asking them now. That's how out of control we are down there. We are paying money to take these children and sell them into sex slavery. They come in with these addresses written on their bodies, written on their arm, and we call up there and say, do you know so-and-so? Yes, we're waiting for them. Okay, they'll be on a plane or a bus, and you need to pick them up. And I asked him, so some pimp or trafficker or whatever is picking them up there, and he said, we are knowingly sending them up there for that. And he said, it's terrible, but that's what's happening.
That's insane. That is insane. And there's no way of verifying if it's their parents they're going to or an aunt they're going to. There's no way of verifying it. And
I asked him, he said no.
Now, what justification could possibly exist where they would stop doing the rapid DNA test? What possible justification would there be to stop that?
It makes no sense because if they find out, well, this isn't their parent, then, okay, what are they going to do with the child? And so
right.
I guess don't ask, and then you don't have the responsibility. But they're sending these children up there, and he's saying we're knowingly sending them into either a sweatshop or the sex industry up there.
Has anybody tried to do an expose? Has anybody tried to follow the children?
Well, that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, has somebody gotten on the same bus or plane and see who's picking them up or
right.
who's not? And he said, yeah, that's happening. Why haven't you talked about it? Well, nobody's asked this, and I'm grateful that you are.
So people are getting on the buses and planes with them to try to find out where they're going?
No.
No, he said they're not.
No.
Oh, I thought you just said
no.
Yes.
I said, why haven't you talked about this? He said, well, nobody's asked this question, but I'm grateful that you are.
My God, that's so insane.
And that's just a little clip. We went in more depth about this.
And the numbers are fucking nuts.
Yeah.
This past year it's been like 3 million.
Yeah. So we've got I've then dug into what's happening with Chinese buying, the Chinese government or Chinese nationals buying farmland, and I've got a map, if I can find it, of where they're buying this land, and it's around U.S. military installations. They're buying up land around U.S. military installations, and so when you look at the amount of land that they're buying, it's not all that much. I mean, it's a lot of land, but given as much land as there is, it's like maybe less than 1%. But when you look at it strategically around military installations, it's really concerning. And then when you look at what's happening at those military installations that they have land around, like B-2 stealth bomber training, drone training and all. It's very, very troubling.
God, it's so strategic where it's all placed.
Yeah, if I can get a hold of that map and show it to you.
It's kind of crazy that the United States has been invaded. And when did that start? With the purchase of farmland?
It's been going on.
For how long? Like when did it? So this is talking about. Son owns 40% of Chinese-owned land in the U.S. He owns over 100,000 acres of land in Valverde County, Texas. Although his two companies, Brazos Highland Properties and Harvest Texas, through his two companies. His purchases in 2016, 2017, his plans to build a wind farm as well as his purported ties to Chinese military drew scrutiny in Texas several years after his acquisitions. He ultimately was denied permission to proceed with his wind farm plans. So they own the land, but they won't let him proceed with the wind farm.
Yeah, and they're building a wind farm where it's not very windy. But it does butt up against a strategic military installment.
What a coincidence. This is the best land that was available.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, how would that be possible here under logical laws? Because in China, you can't do that. They're smart. You can't just buy their land.
We absolutely cannot buy farmland there.
No, you can't buy their businesses either.
Now, we had a man on talking about this, a farmer, and he said they also own the grain elevator where we sell our grain. The Chinese own that. The Chinese government owns that. So, and I said Chinese government. Chinese own that. Now, is it the government? Is it a government agent? Who owns it? He said it's Chinese owned and controlled. If they decide to stop buying his grain, I said, what happens? He said, well,
fucked.
We're out of business.
Yeah. And then you take that, on top of that, the topsoil crisis in this country.
Yeah.
They've got like 60 more crops left.
Yeah.
Unless they do something radical to change it.
And again, I want to be real careful about how I talk about this because I'm not trying. Look, we have so many Chinese Americans here that are wonderful people that contribute so much. I don't want to say anything to create any animus against these people or Chinese people in general. So many of these people are trying to get away from the Chinese Communist Party. They're just trying to get away from them. How they're getting out, I don't know. It's a long way and it's expensive. And you don't just wake up in China and say, I think I'll take a vacation. That's not how that works. You got to get a visa, right? You got to get permission to leave. You got family back there. I don't know how they're getting out, but I know that we've got an awful lot coming across our southern border. And when military-aged Chinese men are showing up at the border, and it's mostly in California where they're showing up, and it's an awful lot. You really,
wild.
You really have to wonder. You really do have to wonder.
Did you ever think you'd be in a position where you'd be talking like this?
No.
Because it sounds conspiratorial, right?
It does sound conspiratorial, and I deal with psychological issues, but these are issues that are on people's mind now. They're saying, I'm anxious about this. It bothers me. I feel like my family is under attack here. We don't have the peace of mind that we used to have. We don't have even farmers are saying, this is troubling to us. We don't know what to do about this.
Yeah.
We don't know how to feel about it. We don't know what to say about it. And nobody's talking about this. Well, I'm talking about it.
Well, I'm glad you are. Because if not, we'll be talking about it when it's too late. And we'll be saying, how the fuck did we not see this coming?
And what I want is, I think if people will start talking about it, people will hear us talking about it and say, these aren't crazy conspiracy guys. These are pretty commonsensical guys that are saying, we should just ask the questions. We should be asking, why isn't anybody asking the questions? And we're not the only people asking the questions, but we're certainly have big microphones to be asking the questions with.
It's just a complete failure of corporate media that they're not asking these questions.
Yeah, and that is the entire reason that I did this network, Merritt Street Media. You know Robin, and I was sitting at our kitchen bar at our house in California, and I was flipping back and forth between different news networks, and I was getting so frustrated. I said, why won't somebody just tell the truth? Why does everything have to be spin? Why doesn't somebody just say what's happening and let us do it? The media just won't say it straight. And she was sitting there eating, she didn't even look up. She just said, well, you are the media. And I thought, yeah, well, and she said, you have a bigger audience than those last three combined, so why don't you do something about it? And it really kind of hit me hard, and I thought, why don't I do something about it? I mean, why don't I create a platform to just ask the questions and tell the truth without all the spin and let people make up their own mind? I mean, somebody needs to say, have you thought about or did you know that last year 33,000 plus Chinese came across the border illegally? Did you know that? And I just want you to know and do with it as you will. And if it causes you to start asking questions and writing your congressman or asking questions of them, then great. But you ought to at least know this is happening. I don't want you to come up 5 years from now and say, well, nobody ever said anything to me. Well, yeah, they did. I raised my hand and I said it. And maybe it'll cause somebody else to say it and somebody else to say it.
Has anybody had a conversation with you about this that has an opposing perspective?
Oh, of course. I mean,
what is their perspective?
Their perspective is these aren't illegal immigrants. You can't. That's not kind to say they're illegal.
Okay.
Well,
we've always used that term for lack of a better term.
Well, okay. So
undocumented. What do you want to call them?
Well, that's unkind. They're migrants, and I understand they want to be here. I don't begrudge them that. If I was living over there, under an oppressive government like that, I would want to be gone, and I totally get it. I would want to be out of there. I really do. I get that, but that doesn't change the fact that we have to pretend that we don't know what's going on. We need to be aware of it, and if it means that we need to say, look, this is concerning. We shouldn't be selling farmland around military installations. There's a lot of land to buy. Wonder why they're buying it right up against military installations.
Have any politicians talked about this? Has Trump ever talked about this?
Not that I am aware of.
Why would that not be something he would bring up?
Well, you would certainly think he would.
Yeah. I mean, I know he's talked about the border, but I don't think he's talked about it in depth. Is it possible that he's not aware of it as far as the way you're aware of it?
God, how could he not be?
How could he not be? But then again, the guy's got like 5 legal cases going on. He's running for president. He's selling sneakers.
Yeah.
See the sneakers?
No,
pretty
I saw
fresh.
that he was
I'm
selling.
getting a pair for Tony Hinchcliffe. They're perfect for him. They're gold. They're gold sneakers. He's got like 3 pairs. One's white, one's red. Yeah.
Wow, that's rough.
But hey, stop it, Jamie.
For $400, that's like expensive.
Oh, I heard there was 5,000. That's what I think they're already sold out. They're selling them online for $5,000 because we were gonna wear them for Sober October.
Okay,
Look at those things. Look at these monstrosities. Look at these things.
Oh, wow. You're going to get a pair?
Oh, hell yeah. I can see Dr. Phil rocking a Trump gold
How do
shoes.
I airdrop something to you?
Here we
how
go
do you
again.
come up?
It'd be like Jamie's MacBook Pro,
Got
MVP.
it.
Got it.
Bam.
I just airdropped this to you. It says waiting.
I am accepting it.
Okay.
What is this?
This is this map with the military installations. You got to look at this.
Is it similar to what he just showed?
No.
Jamie just showed where the farmland was.
Yeah,
so
this is different. Look at this.
So there's the military.
That's the farmland. There's the military installations on top of it.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Look at that. Now, is that...
Look how much farmland they have.
But is that accidental? Come on. That's not random.
It doesn't seem too random, but it also seems amazing how much farmland they have.
Yeah.
Was this always legal? Is that the part of the problem with our open society? That any foreign country can come over here, any foreign investor can come over here and buy land?
Well, I thought there was restrictions on what foreign entities could buy.
So number one is Canada. Canada has the most farmland. They own 12.8 million acres here. Netherlands owns 4.9. Italy owns 2.7. UK 2.5. Germany 2.3. And China
380,000.
380,000. And this is as of 2023,
summer.
June of last year. Yeah, it seems pretty strategic where it's owned. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you put that back up for a second, let me tell you what's at some of these places.
What it says right at the beginning is
Land near the Air Force Base in Grand Forks, North Dakota, sending lawmakers into a frenzy in 2021. Yeah, there's another thing that Mike Baker, who's from the CIA, had brought up, is that one of the things that they're doing is selling cell phone tower equipment and selling routers and undercutting other companies and making like really good deals so they can set up these cheap routers and cell phone companies. And, a lot of these have been proven, especially with the company Huawei, right? When they outlawed Huawei from selling phones in this country.
Yeah.
They were proven that some of their technology has third-party access. They can do things and siphon information and perhaps even, intercept cell phone signals.
Yeah. Well, at that, where they bought in Utah, it's the largest supersonic authorized restricted airspace in the United States. They've got land right next to it. Whitman Air Force Base, B-2 Spirit Stealth Bomber Base, missile and drone operations, MQ-9 Reaper, Global Strike Command, 3 intercontinental ballistic missile wings, and they're right next to it. Fort Liberty, they're right next to it. I mean, all of that stuff. Why would you want your biggest global threat next to those? You have no idea what they have there.
I don't play StarCraft, but I imagine if I was watching someone play StarCraft and all this was setting up, I'm like, oh, they're going to get smoked.
Yeah, it's just.
It's insane.
I think you got to be concerned.
But it's just weird that it's legal. It really is. It's really weird, and especially given what we know about Chinese corporations, that they are a part of the government. They work hand in hand. They don't get to be independent.
Yeah, and
So still, lawmakers from both parties want to limit purchases by Chinese companies, especially those with ties to the Chinese government, which is all of them, and individuals. To this end, there are several bills in Congress aimed at limiting Chinese ownership. Separately, the Biden administration is tightening its rules over who can buy land near military bases. We're going to tighten those rules. What does that mean? How about just make it illegal? Tightening the rules seems. And you should take back the land.
You know what worries me about our young generation is, I don't know if you saw what I had to say about Harvard and
all that craziness with the anti-Semitic talk. Yeah, we've talked about that ad nauseum. It was insane, right?
I think one of the things I said was all they're doing is creating intellectual rot. They're not teaching these kids anything about critical thinking. I don't know what they're teaching at universities now, but if they're not teaching critical thinking, if they're not teaching these kids who we're getting ready to turn the world over to, for your kids, Jay's kids, my grandkids, how are they going to think their way through this? I mean, we're selling them this land here, and we're getting ready to turn the world over to kids who will be adults that we're not teaching to critically think. We're not teaching a meritocracy. How the hell does that work?
We're also not encouraging different opinions. I mean, universities have always been a battleground of intellectual discourse where people get together and they debate things. But if you have an opposing opinion, they'll pull the fire alarm. They'll chant and scream and stop you from talking. They'll try to block speakers from coming. They'll call in bomb threats. Wild shit that is the exact opposite of what universities are supposed to be about. What debates are supposed to be about is an opportunity to prove that you're right. And if you're really good at debating, you can make that person look foolish and you recruit more people to your side of thinking. That's a great way to figure out who's right and who's wrong. If you really believe that your opinions are so much more valid than some person who's a conservative Christian, let that person talk. Get on stage with them. Have an open discourse in front of the entire population of the student body. Let them all come. Have it for free. Let people ask questions if they want. Just do it orderly and politely, and let's get to the bottom of it. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's find out who's wrong and who's got ridiculous ideologies and who's looking at things from a fact-based perspective, or maybe there's a little bit of something from both sides you agree with. But there's only one way to find out, and you're not getting that from universities anymore.
No, you've got to air it out. And what I've said about Merit Street media is I want to own the debate lane in America because nobody else is doing that. So, I mean, what an opportunity, right? What a void. Where I said, okay, look, I'll let both sides or three sides, whatever it is. Now, I'm not going to give a platform to the KKK or, somebody that's just so out there, it's ridiculous. But I had a show I taped recently about transgender, and I had transgender counselors who are in favor of this completely, and the guy's really trained. I mean, he's actually done training about this, and I had people that were vehemently opposed to it, but I gave both sides an opportunity to and they had a really good discussion about it. Let's air it out. If you think you're right, say so and say why. I don't, and I say in the book we've got issues. I say that all of the major medical organizations signed off on this. I say I don't think history's going to be very kind to them. I say my point of view, but I say, listen, I'm not a physician, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but all the medical associations say, hey, it's a good thing to do. I disagree. And I think the empirical science supports me, but they have signed off on it. Even in the book, I put both sides out there. I say I disagree, they don't. I had Dr. Carol Hooven on. Do you know her story?
No. Oh, yes. No, I've had Carol Hooven. Yeah, I've had her on the podcast.
Yeah, great. Isn't she a nice lady?
She's a great lady. I thought you said Hooven on.
No, Hooven.
I thought that name.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she was on quite a while ago.
About transgender athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she said the science is clear. There's no way you can ever equate. You can't take enough testosterone blockers to ever get that back balanced again. She was on my show and Fox and Friends. They drummed her out.
Yeah.
They drummed her out of Harvard. For doing that. And that is one of the most sweet, compassionate ladies.
They drummed her out for telling the truth. She's just telling the truth about the reality of human bodies.
She just reported to science.
Yeah. And when you make science illegal, then you've admitted that you're in a cult. You're running a cult. Because if it's not science-based and you're not open to any discussion or debate, two things. One, you have an oppression hierarchy. well, you value trans women above biological women. You value them. That's the whole reason why sports exist in both a male and female division, is because we've agreed that it's unfair. We've agreed, we all know it to be true. It's just unfair. Are there exceptional women and non-exceptional men? Yes. Do they get no, but at the bottom of the men and the top of the women, there's not a lot of crossover when it comes to professional athletes.
No.
It's not fair at all. And do they have some decrease in performance from using estrogen and testosterone blockers and having their testicles removed? Sure. Yeah, definitely a decrease, but not enough. It's still a male mind. It's still like Chris Williamson was on here the other day talking about the differences in spatial recognition. Men have like the significant difference in the reaction time. There's like a bunch of different factors that don't go away when you transition someone to being a woman. And then there's tendon strength, and there's a bunch of things about the shape of the hips, the ability to generate force. All that stuff is like so much different.
Well, wingspan.
I mean, yeah.
For swimmers, the swimmers, the difference was like 10%.
Well, it's also you're not even holding standards like is what they have to be. They don't have to have like X amount of testosterone or X amount of estrogen. They don't have to have gone through gender transition surgery. A lot of them have their testicles, and they're identifying as male, and it's like, or as female rather. Like, how are you allowing that? That seems insane. That seems like cheating. Like at its base level, you can identify as anything, but when you're getting into sports, that's the whole reason why Title IX was created, right? Is to protect women's sports.
Yeah, and as soon as she said that, as soon as she reported the science, and actually she didn't do the science. She did a meta-analysis of like 50 studies and said, overall, here's what it says. I'm just telling you what it says. Do what you want with it. I'm just telling you what it says.
Yeah.
Transphobic, drummed her out.
It's wild.
And I had Riley Gaines on that show. I had a Olympic athlete, won multiple gold medals in the Olympics. Different people that just said, you're just kidding yourself if you think it's the same. And I felt so bad that she had that result where they drummed her out. If we're not teaching critical thinking, if we're not adhering to science, if we're not embracing science, and when you talk about woke, they say they're postmodernist thinkers, which means they reject science, they reject morality, they reject those things that we've always kind of held as the fundamental building blocks of intellectual discourse. If that's the starting place, we reject science, we reject objectivity. And everything has to be self-referential. If it's important to us at the time, that's our starting place. Well, I'm sorry, that doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It just simply doesn't work. And if they're not teaching critical thinking, and if we're not embracing a meritocracy, what's going to happen to us?
Nothing good. And this is all cult thinking. That's all it is. It's no different than being involved in some wacky sect that you see in a Netflix documentary. It's the same thing. You're not looking at reality. You're only adhering to what these rules are for your particular group. And it doesn't have to make sense. And it doesn't make sense.
Well, internationally, we're 34th in math, 16th in science, and 9th in reading. And we're going down. So if we're not, that's what I mean about meritocracy. If we're not holding these kids to a standard and we're not actually teaching them to get prepared, how are we going to compete on the international stage?
Well, you know the difference between the way our TikTok works and the Chinese version of it works?
Well, I know they don't let them on it very much, if at all.
They don't let them on it after 10 p.m., and they highlight science innovation, martial arts, athletic achievements. They highlight all these very positive things. That's what their algorithm promotes all these very positive things. suppresses all the other stuff, even deletes it and gets rid of it. They don't want any social contagions entering into their children. But on our side, it encourages that. It encourages the wackiest behavior. If you're a guy with a mustache and red nails and you're saying, I'm going to take all your kids, that guy is going to get massive traction on TikTok. He's going to be everywhere. Your kids are all going to be trans, and there's nothing you can do about it. Bah! The outrage, that's a 30 million view video. And then they monetize that. And then other people recognize that that's a successful pattern, just like those dorks that sit in the fake jet seats. Then they start doing it too. Then they start like, whatever I got to do to get the kind of attention that this person's getting. Okay, wear nails, wear a wig, wear this. There's probably fake trans influencers. There's people saying outrageous things specifically just to attract the algorithm. And the way I've described it is this is a thing that I stole from Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins was talking about at one point in time, I'm pretty sure it was him, talking about how if you have two ships that are going in the same direction parallel to each other, and one of them just takes a slight turn, as time goes on, that one's going to be so much further off the original path. And that's what I'm worried about with us, is that all this TikTok stuff and all this social media stuff, it's pushing the norm so much further away. Like you were saying before that people pushed back because they went so far with all this craziness that people are pushing back. But what Jordan Peterson has talked about, and I think he's brilliant with this, he's like, what they'll do is they'll push until you say enough, and then they stop, and then they wait, and then they push a little further, and then you wait a while, maybe less than the time before, and then you stop them again. And then this keeps going on for a long time, and you're so much further away from what you agreed upon was acceptable when you initially started. They just keep pushing. They just keep pushing, and you resist a little bit, and then they stop, and then they push a little more. And it comes in waves. And by the end of it, you're in a position that's unrecognizable. And that's kind of where we are right now.
What do you think it's going to take to stop it? I mean, really stop it. Not in waves, but stop it.
Nothing good. I'm a little terrified. Because I think that the grip that money has, I'm just going to say money, forget about defining it. The grip that money has over politics and political decisions that are made in this country is unshakable. I don't think that's ever going to get shaken. And the best way to ensure that that grip remains tight is to crack down on what people are allowed to and not allowed to talk about on social media, and to encourage as much chaos like we're currently seeing right now that acts as both valid social issues and gigantic distractions. So all those things that are at the forefront, including the immigrant crisis. I think the immigrant crisis is a fantastic way to get people to start thinking about this new problem than to be thinking about all the problems that existed before this was ever being discussed. That's my fear. My fear is that we've gone past this representative republic that we're supposed to be and into this thing that's controlled by money. And no one seems to be stopping that. No one seems to want to stop it. And the only person that talks about stopping it is Trump. But even he is, people are skeptical about his connections to money and all the different forces that are running this world. It's a fucking sketchy time. It's a really sketchy time.
Well, I think it is. And if you boil it down, I think the backbone of this country is the family. I do. I think the family unit's the backbone of this country.
Of any country.
Yeah. And
of civilization.
And if you let that get eroded, and even if you see families together now, they're all on their phones or they're instead of actually talking to each other. And I tell parents, you should talk to your kids about things that don't matter. And they say, why? And I say, because you got to open that channel so it's wide open when it comes time to talk about things that do matter. If you don't ever talk to your kid until it's critical, it's too late, man. You got to start talking about things that don't matter. So when it comes time that they've got a crisis at school or in a relationship or something, they're so used to talking to you that it doesn't feel weird. And so I tell them, talk to them about things that don't matter. So you don't make them feel awkward or on the hot seat, and they can come to you when they really need to talk about things that do matter. And you've got to start talking to them about how to think for themselves and critical thinking that, as I said, is not happening at the universities. And these universities now, let me give you an example. You've heard all this talk about trigger warnings.
Yes.
That's going on in schools and stuff. Trigger warnings don't work. Trigger warnings are exactly the wrong thing to do if somebody's going to be stressed out. And that's not my opinion. There are evidence-based therapies that says if there's something in your life that's going to stress you, you need to learn to cope with it. You need to learn to deal with it. And there are, in therapy, we have like systematic desensitization, immersion therapies, things where you learn if you're afraid of snakes or you're afraid of airplanes or whatever, you have to learn to cope with that because there are going to be snakes in the world. There are going to be airplanes in the world. There are going to be elevators in the world. There are going to be whatever it is that stresses you out. You have to learn to cope with it. Trigger warnings do exactly the other thing. They say, oh, if there's something that bothers you, we'll warn you if it's going to come up, and you can go over here and put your head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. That doesn't work. What's going to happen when you get out in the world and there's nobody there to say, oh, we're getting ready to talk about something that might upset you, so you get to go in this other room and sit in the dark for a while.
Yeah.
You can't do that. And the research says that trigger warnings themselves create anxiety. Not only do they not lower anxiety, they create anxiety themselves. The vast majority of universities have used trigger warnings. They use trigger warnings for Romeo and Juliet, said, involves suicide. Spoiler alert. Really? So they have access to the same research that I do, which is that trigger warnings don't work, but they do it because they're virtue signaling. They want to do it because it makes them look sensitive, even though it doesn't work. If you want to make somebody feel better, you tell them the truth. You want to make yourself look better, you tell them what they want to hear. That's crazy that they're doing this.
It's crazy that they're doing it in universities to people who are supposed to be learning how to experience life, at least semi-independently. You're on your own. You're there now. You're at a new place. Like, to say that this is how the world is going to be once you get out is insane. So you're not preparing them for
It's like you're teaching them to go on red and stop on green, and then you hand them the keys. Are you kidding me? That's exactly what they're doing.
It's so strange. It's so strange that there's no pushback to this either.
And they know this. When they shut the schools down for 2 years, you may remember at the time when they shut it down for a couple of weeks, I said, oh, yeah, okay. I get it. You got to get your bearings here. When it went past a couple of weeks, you may remember I came out and said, bad idea here. You don't want to do this because shutting this down is going to create more problems than the virus will ever create for these kids. I said it's going to create more, and everybody looked at me like I was some kind of heretic. Oh my God, they were saying, "Oh, he's crazy! What a nut! This conspiracy guy, absolutely nuts." And let me tell you who was involved in shutting this down: the Department of Education, CDC, and this is the same bunch that controls the statistics, the research and statistics that I just went over with you that said young people are at the highest levels of anxiety, depression, suicide, and loneliness since they've been keeping records. That didn't start with COVID. It started 10 years before COVID. So they had that information, Joe. They knew these kids, this population is more vulnerable than it's ever been. And they also knew that going to school, interacting with their peers, this was their lifeline. They knew they were the most vulnerable they had ever been, and that going to school was the lifeline that kept them going. And they shut those schools down for 2 years. And they also knew that that school is where the mandated reporters are. That's where the mandated reporters are who report sexual molestation, child abuse, all kinds of trauma to these kids. And when they shut it down, those referrals to Child Protective Services and Department of Child and Family Services dropped as much as 50% because those people didn't have their eyes on those kids anymore. What they did was send them home and lock them up with their abusers for 2 years with nobody to protect them. And you know what they said? They said, we did the best we could with what we knew at the time. No, you did not. You knew better than that. You knew that was not a risk to those children. You knew that that disease was not life-threatening to those healthy children, and you shut it down and sent them home and left them there for 2 years. Some of them locked up with their abusers, the rest of them dealing with anxiety, depression, loneliness, and suicide. You did it because you could, and you had no plan to reopen the schools, and that's where government's getting in the way of being healthy. That's where families are getting broken apart, and that pisses me off.
And it should. Why do you think they did it? What do you think the motivation behind keeping schools closed for that long was? Because it wasn't everywhere. It wasn't here. But it was in California.
Oh, my God.
My kids went back to school pretty quick. And there was also one of the reasons why I wanted to be here. They had a completely different attitude about what you could and couldn't do during COVID. But why would they ever want schools to be shut for 2 years? Like, what's the motivation behind it?
Well, and it wasn't just schools. I mean, they wiped out thousands of family businesses that had been in business 40, 50, 60, 70 years, most of which never came back. They operated on such a small margin. Mm-hmm. They're wiped out forever.
Yeah. So many, at one point in time, was 70% of Los Angeles restaurants.
Yeah. And then they spent $5.5 trillion counting stimulus checks, unemployment, extended unemployment benefits, $4.4 trillion of which went into savings and checkings account, which means they didn't need it. And then when they did spend it, they spent some of it on rent and groceries, the first $1.1 trillion of it. The rest of it went into savings and checking. So they weren't living on it. They were saving it, holding on to it, right? So it wasn't necessarily needed. I think at the time, if you're a hammer, you got a new hammer, everything looks like a nail. They had this power, and here's the problem. Our lives are controlled too much by people that weren't elected. These were bureaucrats that got appointed into positions. So who are they accountable to? We didn't elect the head of this agency or the head of that agency. They just got put in that position. And so they shut things down and changed this economy forever. And those kids that went through that, they lost, a year of learning? Some of it's been made back, but they were behind to begin with.
And what are the long-term consequences of that?
Well, the pediatric epidemiologist suggests that millions of years of life have been lost. And I'll tell you why. Because they don't close the achievement gap educationally, which means they don't do as well in school, so they don't get as good at jobs, and the more blue-collar jobs are riskier. Because they're working with their hands, they're working in places where they're more inclined to get injured or killed on the job. They have poorer benefits in lesser jobs, so diseases get diagnosed more slowly, and so they get treated later in the disease progression, which means that there's a higher mortality rate. And so that shaves
more years off.
And if you've got somewhere between 50 and 55 million kids in the public school system, and however many of them were affected by this, do the math. It doesn't take shaving very many years off at the end of the life to, I've seen estimates anywhere from 5.5 million to 10 million years of lives lost by the fact that they won't have the achievement that they might have had otherwise. And there are some efforts being made to close the gap, but not enough, and the gaps haven't been closed. Right now, 30% of fifth graders and about 30% of eighth graders can't read at the most basic level. 19% of high school graduates can't read at the most basic level. But yet they get progressed on because they get paid if they go to the next grade level. We got issues.
Yeah. It's a great title for a book. It really is. It's very accurate. And I'm glad you're out there. I'm glad you're out there saying these things as a respected voice, as a guy that people want to listen to when you recognize the actual problems and not what everybody's just sort of parroting.
Somebody needs to say this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we got people are picking the wrong battles.
Yeah.
They're picking the wrong battles. They're telling us what we can and can't say. We can't say brown bag lunch anymore. You're not supposed to say that. That's somehow bad news. You can't. I read the other day you can't say hip hip hooray anymore.
Huh?
That offends people with hip injuries.
No, come on.
I kid you not.
Come on. Jamie, pull that up. Hip hip hooray.
Yeah, I kid you not. You can't say now. You don't. Some places don't say felons anymore. They say justice-involved person. So you weren't raped. You were engaged with a justice-involved person, not a rapist, a justice-involved person.
My favorite, it's no more pedophiles. It's minor attracted persons.
Yeah,
that's insane. I've seen university professors teach that to their classes about how the most unrepresented are minor attracted persons.
Now, that's what I mean when I say we're picking the wrong battles here.
But do you think that when I see stuff like that, I'm like, I go back to the Yuri Bezmenov interview, the guy who was the former KGB guy that said that the Soviet Union had infected our schools with Marxism and we're ruining.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, if you watch that speech, everything that he said came to be true. And it's all what we're dealing with right now. It's literally the exact same thing that he was describing in the 1980s.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten a copy of a document from the 60s from the Soviet Union about how to subvert the American society. And Bezmenov says, yeah, it's already been done. We're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, and it's true.
And
how do you think we pull out of this? I don't have a lot of faith. I'm very concerned. I'm very concerned that it's progressing in a direction that even if people push back, the direction is moving so fast with so much momentum, and people are so insane.
Well, I'm the other way. I'm the incurable optimist. I really am. I think that you have to get people that typically wouldn't speak out, wouldn't speak up, because they don't. I think, I said there in this book, there are 10 principles for a healthy society. And principle number 1 is be who you are on purpose. And to me, that's a big one. You can't just wake up and go with the flow and be who you are or whatever you are reactively. Just whatever comes your way that day, that's what you're going to do and who you're going to be. You can't do that. You got to say, look, I'm going to be who I am on purpose. I'm going to decide what I believe. I'm going to decide what I value. I'm going to live those things with intention. Now, you got to think about that for a minute, because you always read about famous people and they say his philosophy or her philosophy of life was, and there'll be some profound thing they say. And I always used to think, I don't really have a philosophy of life. I guess you don't get that until you're dead, and then somebody assigns it, looks at your life and says that your philosophy of life was. But we do have a philosophy of life. Every single one of us do, and we see it by the way we live. And we have to decide, what is my philosophy of life? And is it passive? Is it, do I believe in God? Do I believe in hard work? One of my philosophies is I believe in a meritocracy. I think you reward hard work, added value, talent. That's one of my philosophies. I don't care if you're born on third base, dugout, or dumpster. Wherever you start, you got to work hard to get where you're going. And I think people have to be who they are on purpose. They got to decide, what is it that is important? Am I going to let the school co-parent my child? Am I going to let what's going on in Canada come here and say I don't have rights to my child? If that's true, they're coming out of that school. They're not going to go to a government school then. I'll homeschool them or I'll do something else, but I do have rights to my child and responsibilities. Whatever your philosophy is, write it down, decide what it is, and embrace it. I don't think we can be passive right now, because the easiest way to lose power is to let somebody convince you never had any. That's the easiest way to lose your power, is let somebody convince you never had any power. Yes, you do. You have power. You just have to exercise it. And I don't think people should go to their kids' school and run up the stairs like their hair's on fire, accusing everybody of doing something. Find out what the policies are. They may be fine. They may be great. And if they're not, say, how can I get involved here? How can I help? We got too many people trying to win arguments instead of solve problems. We need to solve problems.
But the way they're being treated, parents, and even in this country, the distinction, the way they're describing some of these parents. Like, there was this one thing that was, what was the bill? There was something that came up that was trying to recognize parents disrupting school board functions because they were upset, and labeling them as domestic terrorists. See if you can find that. Because it was so egregious that I was like, how could you ever say this? You don't think that people are going to be upset if you're trying to tell the parents that everything that you believe is invalid, and that we're going to teach your children the way we see the world, and we're going to protect your child by letting your child tell us secrets and not tell you about them, and we're going to change the child's name when the child's at school, or we're going to whatever the fuck it is, whatever it is.
Yeah, that was in that county in Maryland where it started.
Yeah.
I'll think of it in a second.
But what was the push to try to label the parents as terrorists?
Yeah.
There's a
Attorney General. Scroll to the top of the. Never called concerned parents domestic terrorists. So who did?
That's what it says here. This is where it started.
Okay, where's the?
Right, to be clear.
Okay, to be clear, the Justice Department did not label parents domestic terrorists. As we said, the use of the phrase originated with a September 29, 2021 letter sent by National School Board Association, a federation of state associates that represent locally elected school board officials, to the White House seeking federal assistance to stop what it said was a growing number of threats and acts of violence against public school board members and other public school district officials, mainly over the issue of mask mandates and propaganda purporting to the false inclusion of critical race theory within a classroom instruction and curricula. Critical race theory is a study of institutional racism, is a better means to understand and address racial inequality. It's become a hot-button political issue among Republicans who oppose it being taught in public schools. In that letter, the NSBA said that while it had been working with state and local law enforcement officials, it believed federal involvement was warranted as well. So did they describe them as terrorists? Like, how did that term get brought up? Because they're calling it Hate Crimes Prevention Act, Violent Interference with Federally Protected Rights Statute, the Conspiracy Against Rights Statute, and Executive Order to enforce all applicable federal laws for the protection of students and public school district personnel, and any related measure. It sounds like they're kind of treating them like what they're saying seems like a lot like terrorism.
I think there was a filing that described them as domestic terrorists. I thought I saw something about a filing where they were.
Ted Cruz asked someone, do you believe parents object?
Okay, it says, during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing 2 days later, Senator Ted Cruz said, the Department of Justice looked at the issue, critical race theory, and decided to label the parents objecting to this teaching as domestic terrorists. So that's his distinction, his description. At that hearing, Cruz asked Christian Clark, Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice, do you believe parents objecting at school boards are domestic terrorists? She said, I don't, Senator. Clark said the Department of Justice was committed to ensuring robust civil discourse, and Garland's memo was focused on threats. Clark said the review directed by Garland would determine how federal law enforcement tools can be used to prosecute crimes. Nevertheless, later in the hearing, Cruz again claimed, when it comes to parents at school boards, you're perfectly comfortable with calling a mom at a PTA meeting a domestic terrorist. But this is the thing. Did anyone actually use the term domestic terrorist that wasn't Ted Cruz? Because I thought they did. Letter calling parents domestic terrorism has thrown gasoline on a fire. Allow ads on Fox News. Okay. So what is the letter and what did they quote it as?
National School Boards saying, sorry for language and letter that liken parents to domestic terrorists.
It says, the letter on the September 29th, warning that school boards face physical threats due to opposition to COVID-19 policies and critical race theory. The letter claimed that some unruly parents' protests may be equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism. Yet on Friday, the Department of Justice had issued a memorandum apparently based on that letter. NSBA issued an apology for the letter. On behalf of NSBA, we regret and apologize for the letter, the NSBA said, noting that there was no justification for some of the language including in the letter. Parents at school board meetings in Fairfax County, Virginia, have worn T-shirts declaring parents are not domestic terrorists. So the term was used. So this is more gaslighting.
Is it in that letter that's up at the
link
right there under the bold heading? Yeah, right there. Is it in that letter?
Let's see.
It's a 404 link.
It's been erased from the internet. Convenient.
Yeah, I'd like to know how they do that.
There's got to be a copy of it somewhere. Well, once they changed it, they probably took it down. Is that the actual letter itself?
This is Oregon School Board.
Either way, it sounds like someone said it, which is why people responded, which is why parents didn't wear the T-shirt if nobody had actually called them that. At least I wouldn't imagine they would. Yeah, that sounds like even the way they were describing it. But yeah, some of them could be considered domestic terrorists. I mean, people show up armed. People are crazy, yeah. But the problem is if you call everybody a domestic terrorism, it's essentially you're crying wolf.
Yeah, words are powerful. I mean, words are powerful. And when I say I think people need to decide to find their voice, this is the kind of thing that keeps people from doing it. If you find your voice and you get labeled a domestic terrorist, then that makes people reluctant to find their voice. And that's where I'm saying labeling people as haters and phobic this and phobic that, it's why people go, oh, man, if they're going to write into my job and say I'm anti this or a hater or this is a hate crime or whatever. And I think a lot of groups do themselves a disservice if anybody that disagrees with them or even asks a question becomes a hater. I think they miss a lot of people that might actually be supportive. They're just asking a question. Hang on, we're just asking a question here. I don't think that transgender athletes can compete with the biological women. That doesn't mean that I have anything against the overall concept. It's just athletically, I think that's a bad idea.
Obviously, most people agree with that, and the people that don't, I think they just don't understand what's going on, or they're just ideologically so connected with the idea that trans women are women, they're willing to sacrifice these biological women and the fairness involved in sports. You know, I didn't even know this was an issue until it's like 2015 or 2016. There was a female MMA fighter who wasn't really female, and they were a biological male and didn't tell the first two people that they fought that they were a biological male. So this person beat the fuck out of these two ladies and claimed that they didn't have to disclose it because it was a medical issue, which is just insane. And that's when I found out that there was this insane movement to allow trans women, if you're going to say trans women are women, they should be able to do all the things women do, including compete in women's sports. And then you're going to see records broken, staggering records broken by people that just claim that they're women. And we've seen people do that. In Canada, some good dude just decided he was a woman, entered into a woman powerlifting contest, and smoked everybody.
Yeah.
You don't even have to do anything. You just have to say you're that, which is like at its most basic level, the most ridiculous thing.
Here's something that I found on this Hip Hip Hooray. It says the phrase could have anti-Semitic roots. Rioters in Europe sometimes shouted "Hep, Hep," H-E-P, H-E-P, while on prowl for Jews, and mob harassment of Jews in Hamburg, Frankfurt, and other German cities in 1819 became known as the Hep Hep riots. Hitler's stormtroopers adopted this jeer.
That's a different word.
That's a stretch.
That's a stretch. That's a different word.
We're picking the wrong battles. If somebody's cheering somebody on for a good thing, that seems like a long stretch back to 1819.
It's like when they were trying to say that the OK symbol was white power. Like, God damn it.
Yeah.
You can't just co-opt the OK thing. It's been the OK since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Fuck are you doing?
I never understood that.
It's ridiculous. It's incredible.
I never understood that.
And there's a ton of black people who've done that. It's like the idea that that's a white power symbol.
Well, people were using it, though.
Some people were using it as white power.
Sure.
Were they doing it upside down, though?
I don't know the way that they were doing it, but people were doing that. And
what
numbers? I don't know.
But don't you think they were doing it kind of ironically? Like, is it like a 4chan thing, like free bleeding, where they convince people of something stupid?
Some, but there are people that they would never have know that they don't even know how to get on 4chan that were doing it.
Right, but I bet that's where it started, and then they learned how to do it from that. It's probably one of those things like the flat Earth thing. It starts off as a goof, and then next thing you know, you got a whole movement behind it. There's probably anything can happen like that on the internet now, especially when you take into account the idea of all these Russian bots and trolls and.
Yeah, that's what I mean about things getting oxygen on the internet.
Yeah.
If you started that outside a barn in Nebraska, you and a couple of mouth breathers whose IQ matched the number of teeth you had, it would have gone like half the county. Now it travels the world in a matter of seconds.
Yeah. And then they retroactively look for people from the 90s making the OK symbol and claim there's some giant cult, some white power cult that's always existed.
Yeah, and that's the problem with presentism. I really worry about presentism.
Presentism, meaning what?
Well, presentism is something I've talked about where people hold people to current standards based on something they may have done 10 years ago, 20 years ago as an idiot teenager. And it's gone so far as to go all the way back 250 years. They go back to George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and they want to change school names or tear their statues down now because they owned slaves 250 years ago. Was that a good thing to own slaves? No, that's an ugly thing to do ever, of course. But at the time, it was not looked at. The mores and folkways and laws 250 years ago were not the same as they are today. And they judged them because they didn't have the foresight to say 250 years from now, there will be different standards than they are now. So they judge them now based on what they did 250 years ago using today's yardstick. And that's why they're tearing those statues down now. It's called presentism. It's like if you were in a neighborhood and the speed limit was 30 and you drove 30, but then they came along and said, well, we're going to change this to 20, and we're going to give you a ticket retroactively because you drove 30. And you said, well, but it was 30 when I was driving 30. I know, but you should have known we were going to change it to 20 in the future and driven 20. So here's a ticket, Mr. Rogan.
Oh, my God.
That's presentism. And it's happened a lot. Why do you think they're tearing down those statues? Because of what they did 250 years ago. And I'm not saying it was a good thing to do 250 years ago. That was not America's finest hour. That was not okay. But at the time, it was the moray and folkway of the time. It was the civil. Abraham Lincoln is the one that changed it all, right? He led the charge. But yet still people say, well, not okay. And they do it now. They'll find a tweet that somebody put out or an X that somebody had put out. I guess it was a tweet then, an X now, that somebody may have written as a 13-year-old teenager. Your brain's not through growing when you're 13, but now they pick you to host some event or something. They go back and find something you said
and hold you to it for the rest of your life.
20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Kind of crazy when you think of how short a time period 250 years ago was. That's what's really wild, is how much things have changed in a relatively short amount of time when it comes to human history. It's a rapid amount of change, an almost unstoppable amount of change. Most of it's good. Most of it is good. It's going in a good direction. But a lot of this shit is overcorrection. It's an overcorrection what they think as, oppressed people and historically oppressed people, whether it's gay people, trans people, whatever it is. It's like historically thought of as oppressed people, and there's an overcorrection.
Well, now there are those that everything is seen through the lens of oppressed and oppressor, and they will ignore science. The SAT test was decided to be culturally biased, and so they stopped using it. But the research now says that is actually helpful to minorities, which you can't call minorities now. You have to call them historically minimized.
Okay.
But the research says now these kids don't have the teachers, the resources, the training to make the grades, but they've got the brain power. You give them the SAT, that is a way to catapult themselves out of that situation, and they can qualify not on GPA but SAT, and that it actually is a plus for disadvantaged children, disadvantaged populations. And schools know that, but they won't reinstitute it because they fear being judged, because the general thought is it's a negative. And even though they know it's not, they're so focused on virtue signaling they won't reinstitute it because they're afraid of being called racist.
Well, isn't it just a sign of bad teaching and bad school systems and disadvantaged kids? It shouldn't be a sign that the actual test itself is a problem. The test itself is what's been used to show how competent people are forever. If people are failing the test, the idea that that's because there's some sort of discrimination involved in the test seems so insane. It seems like you're just saying that those people can't compete, that it's an even playing ground, they can't compete. That's not true. You know that's not true. They're getting bad instruction. They're getting bad school system, bad environments. That's what it is. They're not getting a chance to learn.
Yeah, and there are so many bad ideas that I can agree. It's like DEI. I can 100% agree that you want to try and get as many people involved in as many different things at many different levels as possible. I just disagree with the methodology. The quota system, I'm sorry, I don't want to get on an airplane where they lowered the standards for a pilot.
And they're doing that.
I don't want to get brain surgery where they lowered the standards. They fired that professor at, I think it was at NYU, it was in New York, because he made the anatomy and physiology or physiology class too hard, so they fired him because he wouldn't make it easier. I'd rather have somebody that made it through.
What is the story about that case? Like, what are the details? See if you can find that, Jamie.
Oh yeah, it's
that seems insane. So how long has this guy been teaching?
Oh, forever. He had been teaching forever. I may have it.
Jamie will find it. He's got it already. NYU students were failing organic chemistry. Who is to blame? This is the New York Times. I like how they phrase it. Maitland Jones Jr., a respected professor, defended his standards, but students started a petition, and the university dismissed him. Wow. Scroll down.
Yeah, how long had he been there?
Okay, last spring, campus emerged from pandemic restrictions. 82 of his 350 students signed a petition against him. Students said the high-stakes course, notorious for ending many a dream of medical school, was too hard, blaming Dr. Jones for their poor test scores. The professor defended his standards, but just before the start of the fall semester, university deans terminated Dr. Jones' contract. The officials also had tried to placate the students by offering to review their grades and allowing them to withdraw from classes retroactively. The chemistry department's chairman, Mark E. Tuckerman, said the unusual offer to withdraw was a one-time exception granted to students by the dean of the college. Mark A. Walters, director of undergraduate studies in the chemistry department, summed up the situation in an email to Dr. Jones before his firing. He said the plan would extend a gentle but firm hand to the students and those who pay the tuition bills. There it is. An apparent reference to parents, the university's handling of the petition provoked equal and opposite reactions from both chemistry faculty who protested the decisions and pro-Jones students who sent glowing letters of endorsement. Okay. Yeah, that's not good. It's supposed to be hard. It's really hard to be a doctor. Yeah. If you're failing, maybe that's not for you.
Yeah, and I don't care how flat you make a pancake, it's got two sides, so I'm sure there's two sides to it. But to fire this guy,
yeah.
I mean, that's supposed to be tough. In college, there are always washout courses. And you know who they are. So withdraw from the class and take it from somebody else. But don't fire this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, this wasn't his first time.
Especially if you've got students that give the guy glowing reviews, and especially if he's highly respected. When you're going to have a very difficult course, like I'm assuming organic chemistry is, and you have 300 people in there, there's some people that just aren't cut out for that. That's just going to be the case with everything in life that's hard to do. You can't have chess tournaments become easier because some people aren't doing well at chess and say chess is too hard. Well, it's not too hard for Magnus Carlsen. Why is it too hard for you? Well, maybe it's not for you, or maybe you're not working hard enough, or maybe you need to figure something out.
Yeah, and some schools...
Look at this. Students were misreading exam questions at an astonishing rate. He wrote in a grievance to the university protesting his termination. Grades fell even as he reduced the difficulty of his exams. The problem was exacerbated by the pandemic, he said. In the last 2 years, they fell off a cliff, he wrote. We now see single-digit scores and even zeros. After several years of COVID learning loss, the students not only didn't study, they didn't seem to know how to study, Dr. Jones said. To ease pandemic stress, Dr. Jones and 2 other professors taped 52 organic chemistry lectures. Dr. Jones said that he personally paid more than $5,000 for the videos and that they were still used by the university. That was not enough. In 2020, some 30 students out of 475 filed a petition asking for more help, said Dr. Arono, who taught that class with Dr. Jones. They were really struggling, he explained. They didn't have a good internet coverage at home, all sorts of things. The professors assuaged the students in an online town hall meeting, Dr. Aurora said. Many students were having other problems. Dr. Kirschenbaum, another chemistry professor at NYU, said he discovered cheating during online tests. Okay. So it seems like COVID had a big factor in it. They came back from COVID, and that just makes a lot of sense. You're young. For 2 years, you're not studying. You're not doing jack shit. And then you come back, and you're really soft.
Yeah. But when you now get out there to treat a patient...
Right.
You either know it or you don't.
You either know it or you don't. And it's not for everybody, and that's why it's hard to do. I had a buddy of mine who was an ophthalmologist, and he told me the lowest point in his life. He was doing his residency. He was on the toilet with a tray on him, like a food tray. So he's eating while he's on the toilet, and he fell asleep, and his buzzer went off because he got called back into work. So this guy was working such fucking insane hours. I mean, he's like, I just didn't know if I could keep going. And that's what residency is like. When you talk to doctors, you can tell people, when they're going through their residency, it's insane, the amount of hours. It breaks people.
Yeah.
You got to know that this is what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
It's a very hard job.
I did an internship at a 1,200-bed psychiatric hospital. And
Woo!
I tell you, if you don't see it there, it doesn't exist. And...
you should write a book on that.
Yeah, sometimes it was just marathon, and but I mean that's where you cut your teeth. I mean that's where you figure it out. You see everything.
If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Exactly.
With everything in life.
Yeah.
Everything that's hard.
And one of the things I talk about here is develop consequential knowledge. Consequential knowledge is something you learn, something you develop, where they can't replace you by noon tomorrow. You got to have a skill set, and it could be setting fence posts, it can be fixing a copier, it can be fixing a computer, it can be a brain surgery.
Making tables.
Whatever. But
whatever.
It's something that they can't replace you by noon. If you don't have consequential knowledge, you're making a big mistake. You got to find something you're passionate about, and some skill set, knowledge set that is specific to you that they can't replace you by noon tomorrow.
And people out there that are hearing this that are frustrated, like, oh, that's easier said than done. Yes.
Damn right it is.
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah. And that complaint is the one that infuriates me the most. Like, it's not that easy. You're right. It's not that easy. It's really fucking hard. But it can be done. And it might not be done by you. It might be done by one of your friends. Yeah. It might be done by some people that you know that worked harder than you. And that lets you know that that's real. And you're supposed to be able to learn from that.
Yeah, but this idea of equality of outcome is insane.
It's insane.
That's what so many people on the left and so many college professors right now are talking about the goal needs to be equality of outcome. We don't even have equality of opportunity. That we can work towards.
Right.
We need to do a better job.
That should be the number one priority.
That we should try to level playing field on equality of opportunity.
Yes.
But we'll never get equality of outcome.
Because you never get equality of effort.
No. If somebody wants to sit home in a beanbag eating Cheetos, that's not the same as somebody that sits on a toilet with their eating their lunch, falling asleep.
Also, we're not all the same.
No.
There's no way we can get equality of outcome. It's just not going to happen. There's people that are fucking smarter than you.
That works until you run out of somebody else's money. And when you run out of somebody else's money where you're giving everybody the same thing, and here's the thing, equality of outcome is there are a lot more liberal professors in college than there are conservative professors.
A lot more.
Because the liberal professors don't want to get out in the real world and compete. So they go to the university where they don't have to compete the way they do in the real world. But that being said, here's the thing. If you are going to an Ivy League school, and so you're paying $200,000 for this elite education, and then they teach the goal is equality of outcome, then why do I need an elite education? If the goal is equality of outcome, why am I paying you $200,000 for this elite education? If the goal is equality of outcome, why don't I go get in the beanbag and eat the Cheetos? Why am I paying you $200,000?
Well, that's what scares me about a universal basic income. I used to think that was a really good idea until I saw the way people responded when they got checks during the pandemic, and especially people that got unemployment. They did not want to go back to work.
Well, no.
They did not want to go back to work. And the idea, the beautiful part of the idea is that if you gave people enough money for food and shelter, then they could pursue their dreams. Some will do that, but how many are we going to lose if you give people that? How many, if you could take away incentive, how many people are never going to get their ass in gear? That's a number too.
Well, I can't quote you the exact numbers, but I can tell you the trend, and that is the longer you're off work, the less likely you are to ever return to work. And I can tell you why the research says that's true. And these are people that have legitimate injuries, for example. I mean, truly have a back injury at work or something where they have to have fusions and that sort of thing. You adjust your world. Your world shrinks. First off, your identity changes. Maybe you were a welder or a bus driver or something. That was a big part of your identity. Now your identity becomes patient. Your social world, your friends become fellow patients. You get up every day and you go to rehab, to back rehab, and you're doing all these exercises. You're going to the doctor. They become your friends. Your world shrinks down. You adjust. You say, well, we're going to have to get by with one car. I can't drive anyway. You'll have to drive me. We can sell one car, keep one car. Your world shrinks down. You adjust to it. You're still watching your football team on the weekends on TV. You're living on less money, and you adapt. You adjust. And you get used to that. And now everybody thought, for example, at the end of the lockdown, that when that was over, it was going to look like that movie Grease when school was out and they had the carnival and everybody came running out of the end of the deal and they were running around. They thought that was what it was going to be like when the lockdown was over. But it wasn't. People came out and what they used to take for granted was kind of intimidating. They were like, is it okay to be out here? What are we going to do? They didn't want to go back to work. It gets intimidating. So they get used to it and they get comfortable. I was shocked when people said, what happened to the supply chain? Well, you paid people more money not to work than to work. They gave them unemployment plus a bonus, and then a bonus on top of the bonus, plus they didn't have the money for the commute, and gas was $7 a gallon in California. You remember that? It was $7 a gallon there. And so they thought, well, I don't have to spend $200 a week on gas, and I can sit here. Well, that's what happened to the supply chain. Nobody wanted to work. Their world shrunk down. And the problem in America, and I talk about it in a section in the book, is not income inequality, but income equality. If you look at the bottom 20%, and compare them to the middle 20% of the distribution, the difference, the bottom 20%, only 5% work full-time. The middle 20%, 95% work full-time. And the difference in their incomes is single-digit thousands because of all the entitlement programs for the bottom 5%. Food stamps, unemployment, rent subsidies. There are 100 programs. And when you get all of that money that they get for free, the difference between them and these that work 95% of the time is single-digit thousands. How crazy is that?
It's pretty crazy. It definitely doesn't incentivize you to do anything different. Why would you want to bust your ass all day, logically, doing a job that you hate, traveling, commuting, spending all that money on gas when you can make a real similar amount doing nothing.
It undermines a meritocracy. And the point is, if you're working in that middle 20% and you work hard, then you might wind up in the next 20%. And now all of a sudden, there's a bigger difference. And that's why we've got all of these quiet quitters and lazy girl jobs and all that stuff out there that's really taken off on the internet.
What's ironic is it infested tech platforms. And then tech platforms like, hey, we got to fire everybody. We got to fire so many people. They're firing so many people. The tech layoffs are bananas.
Yeah. And it was just on Friday, Paramount laid off like 900 people. What are they going to do? It's like 950 people, 850 people, something like that.
And then there's the journalists.
Yeah.
LA Times just laid off a bunch of people. People are dropping like flies. Sports Illustrated closed down.
Yeah, and now you're going to have AI doing a lot of those jobs.
A lot of those jobs, especially jobs you have to write a story on something.
Yep.
Easy. Write a story on Dr. Phil's new network. Write an essay. Easy.
Yeah.
It'll come up in seconds. Perfectly worded.
Yeah, and here's a question that I'm going to have to face is, let's say that ChatGPT uploads 10 of my books and 1,000 hours of my TV shows.
Right.
And then answers a question, what would Dr. Phil say about this? And from all of that, I'm guessing they get pretty close.
Yeah.
Is that copyright infringement or not? They're not quoting me.
Right.
But it trained their
algorithm, whatever it is, their AI to talk like you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they could have you actually doing you.
Yeah.
You know?
Now that would be using, maybe not.
For now, but, if it's tracked all the way back to Nigeria or somewhere where you can't do anything about it.
And if you get somebody like me I've got like 3,500 episodes, you've got, what?
2,000 something.
2,000 episodes. I mean, they can take us,
Easy.
upload us. They don't need us.
They don't need you anymore.
We're worthless. We're obsolete.
And they can change your perspective on something if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Like if they wanted to have people listen to Dr. Phil, let's have Dr. Phil say something wacky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They used to do that with soundboards, on the disc jockeys to do funny stuff and stuff.
Yeah.
It was funny at the time.
Yeah.
This now could be serious. And coming into an election year, what if they get close to the election and do a deep fake with one of the candidates saying something outrageous like, hey, some stuff has come out about me that you're going to hear soon, and I'm dropping out of the race, so don't waste your vote on me. And they drop that so late that the real candidate doesn't have a chance to counter it.
Yeah.
It could actually drive the election outcome.
Yeah, it really could. It's spooky time, sir.
Yes, it is.
I'm glad you're out there, though. I really, really appreciate your perspective and your willingness to say these things, because I know there's a lot of pushback and people get pretty crazy.
Well, they do, but, I let both sides talk, and I'm sure I'll get criticized for that, but this new network is...
Where's it going to be? How can people access it?
We'll announce all that as soon as we get our channel assignments in the next week or so, and I'm going to be on there. Nancy Grace is on there. Bear Grylls is on there. Mike Rowe is on there. Robin's going to have a show
real
on
network.
there. It's a real network with
That's
a
amazing.
lot of original programming. 4 hours of news every day.
I'm really excited you're doing this. We've been calling for something like this to happen for a long time. You're the perfect guy for it.
Yeah, and it's all going to be just straight up talk, but you won't be able to not find Merritt Street. We'll be on every cable system, we'll be everywhere.
Beautiful.
We'll have our own channel, and it's 24/7. And we've got issues is really the blueprint for the network, because it's all going to follow the same straightforward, science-backed, fact-based. So it's not really people tell me how they feel. I don't really care how they feel. I barely care how I feel. What matters is what is. It matters what the facts are. That's what matters. It doesn't matter how I feel or they feel. It matters what is.
Yeah.
Doesn't somebody need to get back to the facts?
Well, you're the man for the job.
Yeah. I hope so.
I think so.
I'm going to give it hell. And,
I know you are.
And the audio book comes out the same day, so if people don't want to read it, they can listen to it.
Beautiful. When is it out?
February 27th.
Is it right here? We're coming to you live from February 19th, so next week. Pick it up, folks, and prepare yourself for the network. I'm very excited. We'll help you promote it.
All right.
Appreciate you, brother.
You always
Thank
do.
you very much. You're the man.
Thank you, Joe.
Bye. Bye, everybody.